So good morning, everyone. I would like to call to order the Information Technology Committee meeting of the Niagara Regional Police Service Board. It's a public meeting being carried out by teleconference. This is July the 9th, 10:20 in the morning. Call to order. All board members are present. Senior staff from the Niagara Regional Police Service are present on the line as well. I will call for any declarations of conflict of interest from any board members. Not hearing any there. We will move to the two items for new business, which is item number 1. This is the first one is a receive for information report on Microsoft Office 365 implementation update. Turn that over to the chief or to any of the staff that he designates. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. You recall at our last IT committee meeting, you had requested some additional information, and this report has been furnished through our director, Acroma School, and hopefully has addressed all of the questions and or concerns that you may have had. I'll turn it over to Akram, and he can provide just a very high-level overview of what's contained in the report.
Mr. Chair, as the Chief indicated, so this is providing you an update, Mr. Chair, and to the board where we're at with Office 365 implementation. So I kind of provided more, the approach is we're approaching this in a very controlled and phased approach. And phase 1 really was the foundation of enabling Office 365 to be implemented. We have established that with the assistance of Microsoft engineers. And that phase allows us to actually control the identity of who's accessing any Office 365 resources, and does have conditional access and the proper way of authenticating to our network. With the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, we expedited some of the implementation of the Office 365 application, and we started with Microsoft Teams. So we do have that implemented across the whole service, and all our meetings right now are conducted virtually through Microsoft Teams, and it also allows us to collaborate in content through meetings, so we don't have to actually be physically in one place. So this is a really good news for the Niagara Police, and we're beginning now a very controlled migration with some IT folks and records to migrate some of our email, again in a very controlled access, and it allows the records to now explore the classification of those records and to implement them according to the best practices of security, cloud policies, while considering also the Government of Canada cloud policies. And we're looking at also utilizing devices. So as devices come in from remote access or from the office or any other building, is we also control it and make sure that the devices that are coming into our systems through the cloud have the appropriate protections. So I know this is a quick couple of bullets or points on the migration. We're doing well, Mr. Chair, and we're continuing that journey through this year and part of next year to migrate all of our users. There are some financial benefits by utilizing the investment we've made in the 365, and we're evaluating those efficiencies as we go forward. If you have any questions or any board members have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, questions on this item number 1 report, please? So not hearing any. Akram, through the chief, to you. I have a couple of questions, as you probably can expect, on dealing with this one here. Page number 2. Our last business and IT strategic plan, has that been updated to reflect this change, like moving into this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am in the process of updating the IT strategic plan, and we'll be vetting that through the chief and the deputies, and then when we're ready, we'll bring it back to the board for adoption. The original plan was talking about efficiencies in IT, talking about the cloud. So we are in the process of updating it now. We do have the strategic plan approved by the board. I hope that answers the question, Mr. Chair.
I thought that plan that we approved, I thought that had expired with the, or has very close to expiry with the new, I'll call it 4-year business plan that the board approved several months ago. So we need
correct.
a new IT or technology plan to dovetail into that, correct?
That's correct, and that the original plan was a supplemental to the strategic plan. Now we do have an approved strategic plan. Now we're ready to actually align the IT strategic plan with the business strategic plan. So we are in the process of refreshing that to align it with the approved strategic plan. So you're absolutely right. They
Close are we to that coming back to the board, the IT strategic plan? Is that something we can look forward to in September?
I'm going to do my best. I don't want to give you a promise. I'm working on it, but I really need the chief and the deputies to first and exec staff to vet it, and we'll bring it back to the board as soon as it is reasonable to do that. But I'll do my best to bring it up sooner than later. But I don't want to promise you in September because we're dealing with COVID and so forth. But we'll do our best to report back promptly. And
the other one is on page number 3. This deals with the comments dealing with Active Directory. You would have been running an Active Directory service within the police service. Now it would appear that you're moving that into the Azure cloud environment. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're maintaining the on-prem for security reasons. All what we're doing with the cloud, Azure, is we synchronize the identity to make sure that it's a legitimate identity, but with the controls habits on-prem. And when we utilize any cloud application, we just want to synchronize it to make sure that you are an active employee, you are a valid employee, and you're allowed to access the resources.
So even though we have access to this Azure cloud, I'll call it, we're still going to maintain more than 90% is going to be maintained on site. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
So having that Azure cloud, is that something that we can use as a ability to back up our on-prem data?
Yeah, this is something that we're looking at it through IT, is what we can do to do backup on the cloud. Because now as you expose some content like Outlook into the cloud, we have to be able to back that up as well, because today we back up on-prem only. So that is part of the engineering we're doing internally.
The email store, as I refer to it, is which used to be on-prem, or probably still is on-prem, with use of the Office 365 or a rebranding of Microsoft 365. Do those Outlook, what used to be PST files, now reside totally in the cloud?
Yeah, the content will be in the cloud. We're not looking to allow the caching of those emails in the cloud for security reasons, but the content of the email itself will be on the cloud, yes.
Okay. So then moving hold on, I think I got one last question. Page number 4. This is tied into the email in that. We have within the police service specific bylaws dealing with retention of data. Does this change from an email perspective the ability to have a longer retention period of email?
I know Gary is away on vacation, but that's something that is part of the information management governance that Gary and his team are looking at to actually define the appropriate retention based on their record type. So I know Gary is not here, but that's something that Gary is looking into, to actually have retention to comply with the retention and classification policy. So some may be retained for a week, some of them may retain for a year. I don't want to speak out of context because Gary is not here, but that's something that Gary is looking at a great detail of how we maintain content in relation to a file, a record, and anything related. So I know I didn't give you a 100% answer, but we are looking at the retention, especially in the cloud.
Okay. And I also then, I mean, that's a good thing. I think we need to make sure that the retention strategy and retention requirements of specific data types is maintained going forward with Microsoft 365, regardless of whether the data is cloud-based or on-prem based. So I will leave basically through the chief that our retention requirements are going to be maintained and preserved regardless of where the data is. This moves me down to this comment about a SharePoint being basically phased out by Microsoft, and it's your comments on page number 5. Internally within the service, you have your front page delivery, what I call the IRIS system, or you call it the IRIS system. Was that SharePoint based?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. It is SharePoint.
So are you then going to move that to a different way of delivery? I mean, obviously the data is very important to our members in the service, but are you going to move that to a different delivery platform?
Mr. Chair, we're looking at a hybrid model. So we're going to deliver anything that is deemed public or not confidential or sensitive or protected be. Any confidential private records will be maintained on site, but anything is public will be delivered through the SharePoint online, and that's consistent with every police services strategy. There's no reason to maintain everything on-prem, but anything confidential, it will be the content will actually. So we'll have a hybrid SharePoint, we'll have a SharePoint online, and we'll have one on-prem only for confidential and highly confidential content.
Okay, but on page 5, you indicate a movement away from SharePoint, because it's the impression from this I get is that SharePoint is being phased out by Microsoft. Is that correct?
Page 5, we're still maintaining SharePoint, but we're migrating it under the Microsoft 365 platform, and the Microsoft 365 platform includes SharePoint, which is what we're saying is we're going to put a lot of the content and the servers on the cloud, with the exception of the confidential records.
Okay.
So SharePoint is part of 365.
So they're still going to maintain just rebranding it. So then my next question, because we spent over the years a fair bit of money on having data redundancy and server farms and et cetera internally. From a cost savings perspective, because I mean I think this is where this is all supposed to be trying to end up, will we see, maybe not this year, but in years going forward, the ability to have less physical hardware in the way of servers on-prem, and being able to support more of this in a secure Azure environment in the quote cloud?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's the actual vision, is where we can migrate servers to the cloud versus having to maintain physically in the data center. Because if you maintain everything physically in the data center, you'll have to have a replacement lifecycle strategy, and this may not be the cost-effective way. So we're looking at putting whatever is appropriate on the cloud and not maintain physical infrastructure here.
Okay. My last point on this, and it's not more of a question, but in the next sort of report that comes to us highlighting, and I would say probably in 6 months where this is, can you, in your report, and again through the chief, can we somehow capture, we're using X number of servers or X number of blades with X number of terabytes in storage, but by moving to this, we're able to offload some of that to the cloud, and hence we're going to be reducing our servers by 20% or some number like that. I think we need to show here that there's a fair expenditure to move to this, and I don't disagree with this. But I think we need to offset that by saying we've reduced some physical servers because of the ability to store in a secure Azure environment. Can you undertake that in some sort of future reporting to show by doing this we're able to reduce the number of physical servers on site?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll do that. Just a very brief comment. In the previous strategic plans, we talked about evergreening our technology, and we started by doing the virtualization in our data centers. So this is really phase 2 of the evergreening by reducing the footprint where appropriate. So it's consistent with what we've been saying in the strategic plans. But absolutely, Mr. Chair, I will provide a report, on what we have today and what that could look like in the moving forward.
I think that's important because, as I said, I mean, we have spent a fair bit of money, and I don't disagree with. I think it's money well spent. So I need a mover and seconder, please, for this report. It's a receipt for information.
I'll move it, Henry.
Thank you. Seconder?
Dave.
Thank you, David. Is there any additional questions on this from any board members? Okay, in calling the question, is there anyone who does not wish to approve receipt of this report? Not hearing anything, that moves forward. The next item is item number 2 on the agenda. That's the Digital Evidence Management System, or DEMS. It's an update. It's another receipt for information. There is a item in here for capital budget 2021. So I'm going to, on this one a little bit differently, it's a receipt for information, but I will call for a mover and seconder to put this report forward. A mover, please.
Bill.
Hey, Bill. Here, please.
Tara will second.
Thank you, Tara. So, Chief, I'll turn this one over to you. I believe this is a initiative from the province. Chief?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, in the policing realm, we have become much more. We have come into possession of much more video, photographic, and audio files, and much in need of a digital evidence management solution to be able to store and manage all of this digital evidence that us and other police services and other industries, for that matter, are all coming into possession of. As a result of that, the Ministry of the Sole Gen issued a request for bids to address the needs of the OPP with their digital evidence management needs. But in doing so, have structured the RFB, or the request for bids, in such a way that it allows other police services, ourselves included, to be able to leverage the results of that RFB process to achieve a solution that will meet our needs, but will also leverage a solution that will have the most cost-effective means for us to achieve that solution. So this is really we're not there yet. The bid has closed from the ministry. They're continuing to evaluate the bids that have come forward, and this is really just an interim update to the board to make you aware that where that project rests, and to anticipate that we will be moving forward with a digital evidence management solution in our 2021 budget.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions on this one, please.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Chief, this digital, it's Dave, it's the digital evidence management system. Would that have the opportunity for future use of perhaps frontline police services using video cameras? Would that be capable of of dealing with that technology?
From a storage perspective.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, from a storage perspective, it certainly would allow for that.
Well, that's excellent. So it's providing us future uses as well. So thank you very kindly.
The other board members have questions, please. Chief, I have one or two on this item. The DEM system, is that only information that is going to be submitted as part of a Crown brief process, or does that allow us as a service to store, and I'll use Member Eek's video data from the service, whether it's going to be used in a criminal case or just to be stored for an FOI/retention time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Akram to provide more of the technical aspect, but it's my understanding that it will address all of our digital evidence needs, not just Crown briefs, but other avenues within the service as well.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Chief. So just for the board's benefit, so today we do electronic disclosure back to the Ministry of Attorney General and what we call the court scope. It's a scope project. So all crime briefs are disclosed. One piece is missing is disclosing the digital evidence with the crime brief. The digital evidence solution the Chief provided you an update on ties in scope with the digital evidence as part of the disclosure of what's in the crime brief, so forth. So that's how police services who have gone down that road have tied the two together to be a single submission. The Crown reviews the evidence and then they can disclose the defense if they choose to, but it all becomes integrated into one disclosure process. I hope that answers the question.
Well, then the question I have is basically two-parted here because there's two items here. The initial capital outlay of $650,000, that's something that to me is a piece of hardware or some sort of a hardware solution at our end. What is the details of that? What is that $650 going to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at this point in time, again, it will depend on what the results of the RFB process are. It's quite possible that there may not be any capital investment that's required depending on, again, the results. It could be very much a subscription-based solution that ends up being awarded. So again, that $650,000 amount is if we were to do it on-prem, but again, we're not certain that that is going to be the solution of choice.
Okay, and then the follow-up question to that then is you've allocated as an operating component of this $130,000 a year. I'm going to basically you're basically paying for some sort of a subscription for data storage. There's no staff component inside that. Is that correct?
No, there will still be a staff requirement from our end here, and I'll let Akram speak to that piece.
Chief, just to explain the capital versus subscription based on the report, the ministry have specifically issued a request for bids for a cloud solution, or what they call it, a software solution. So everything will be hosted on the cloud based on the ministry's definition of that solution. So as you indicated, Mr. Chair, that will all be all the software and the storage associated with utilizing the cloud solution. On the staffing model, I don't want to be out of context here, but what we've learned in talking to a lot of police services, as you begin to implement managing those solutions, and not including redaction, for example, of records, they've alluded that they may need some staffing to actually utilize the technology. So that's what we've been hearing through the OOCP and the CACP, that it's not just the software, it's the management of it, that you need people to manage that as well. So
That was
But with respect to the funding, strictly what we think today, based on what we've seen in the police industry, is what that cost would be based on how many licenses we can provision. That could go up and down. But the numbers we provided is a good estimate of what that could look like per year.
No, I'm going to use an example here because, I mean, it's out there. It's a discussion item. We're not the only police service. We've allocated a capital item to deal with body-worn camera systems going down the road eventually. That produces a huge amount of data to be stored, and there's no clear decision in whether it's stored for 30 days or 3 years or whatever the case may be, but it can generate huge terabytes and terabytes of data to be stored. The issue that I have always when I see these is based on storage requirements, if one was to try to host that inside, you would just keep adding servers and servers to max that out. I also do know that there is a requirement from what I call a redaction component of a staff person just to manage all of that. But what I'm concerned about here is, and I know you clearly say it's an estimated cost. Has the ministry ever indicated as to, for our, let's say, 650 or 130, what we actually get? Do we get unlimited storage with that, or is there specific caps or scaling based on how much storage we require?
At this point, through you, Chair, we don't know that until the bid analysis is done and there's an award to a successful vendor, and then we'll have much more details as to caps and limits for data storage.
Okay, so I look at this as a work in progress. Obviously, we need to embed into the 2021 capital the 650, which may be used, may not be used. Anything in capital comes to the board, and we say, okay, fine, we're going to start moving down a specific route. So this is, again, a placeholder in capital for 650, and I'm going to suspect that in the 2021 operating budget, as you indicate, you're going to put in the 130 earmarked for this project as well. And hopefully by the end of the year, I suspect by the end of the year, from what I read here, you'll have a clearer understanding from the ministry as to where we're going on this. All of that correct?
Yes, that's essentially correct. I want to just have Laura speak to the budgeting piece because she may have some clarification on capital versus operating budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to be clear, the 650,000 is over 5 years. Because it's subscription based, it's going to be 130,000 to 140,000 potentially per year. And because it's subscription based, we will be putting that in our operating budget and not submitting it as part of the capital budget.
So then, to be clear then, so in the capital line budget, we're not going to see 650 and we're not going to see 130 because we would be unable to take staff dollars out of capital anyway.
Correct. You will not see 650,000 submitted as part of the capital budget, but when we submit our operating budget, we will include about 140,000 in the software licensing section of the operating budget to reflect this investment.
Okay, I think the other thing you need to make clear then in the budget is the software component and what I call the human resource component to this. That needs to be clearly stated, so that we know that there's a human resource or a person cost to this besides the licensing piece here. I think that's very important.
I think going forward as part of our budget presentation, that will be spelled out for the board as to whether or not there are any new positions that would be required for it, or whether we're able to absorb the work and management of the solution with the existing complement of IT staff that we have. But that will be made clear to the board.
I think that's important. Board members, any additional questions on this item? Okay, so we have a mover and seconder. It was Bill and Tara. I'm calling the question on this. Is there anyone who wishes to vote against this received for information? Not hearing any, so this matter is approved. We move to the next section, which is any new business. Is there any new business?
I think,
David, is that you? Go ahead.
is there not on item 3, Mr. Chair?
I don't see it. We're on the IT one.
Yes, there is an item 3. It's the Enterprise Content Management System, open text.
But did that come out of the secondary email?
That is
There
correct.
was a revised.
Okay, my apologies on that. So, can somebody, hold on. I'm trying to pull that up. Just give me a minute. Okay, so I got it now. Sorry about that. The Enterprise Content Management is an open text maintenance renewal. It is for a 1-year support for the price of $108,286.37, starting in October 1st of this year, going to September 30th of next. I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor, please.
Dave moves.
Moved by Member Eek, seconded by?
Kevin will second.
Thank you. Member Gibson, any questions on this item?
Bob has questions.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, Chair. First, the easiest question. There's a lot of acronyms on this. So the net of rebates that we're seeing here, and it's an easy answer if that's based on HST, or is it net of rebates on the renewal for the M&S of the ECM system? Is it based on HST, the net of rebates?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, yes it is. It's the difference between it's the 1.76 that we have to pay.
Okay, thank you. That solves that one. So through you, Chair, probably to Akram, but I have a question on this. It's a 5% increase. And Akram, I'm going to ask you to comment on what I'm saying. It's a 5% increase, and it looks like it's sole sourced, but it might be only sole sourced because Microsoft might be the only people, or these people are the only people. I don't profess to understand IT as much, but I'm wondering, it says in here they're researching an option, an ECM option, and this is to be renewed in October, I believe it is, of this year. Is there any value on delay and seeing a better option on this? So if you can comment, is this sole sourced? Is there an option not to sole source? And is there a reason that we could delay this to have a better option as is in the report?
And through you, Mr. Chair, so back to the first question on the sole source, this is directly with the manufacturer of that solution. This is not through a reseller. So this is just renewing the maintenance of the enterprise content system we have, which is through OpenText. So OpenText is the actual manufacturer of that. So we went directly with them, and they do not resell their support services. So that's why we have to deal with them directly. And the reason we're recommending a 1-year renewal versus entering into a 3-year is we are looking into the option of migration, some migrations to the Office 365, which we discussed earlier. We're not in that position right now. So we just want to continue the maintenance for support purposes to allow us time to potentially migrate some of that technology through OpenText into the cloud.
Okay, so thank you for that, Akram. Is there any reason that we shouldn't delay this report because you're looking into it for an October renewal and there might be a better option in September, or is that too late?
It's too early to say that, Mr. Member. If we actually don't renew in September, October, we will not get support, and that can be catastrophic for records. So we do not have enough time between now and September to actually say no when to migrate from that solution. So again, that's why we only recommended to the board we're going to renew for 1 year instead of 3 years.
Okay, thank you for those answers. I'll defer to the chair now because, well, of course, Chair Genzel, you didn't see this report coming up, so I don't know if you have any questions related to what I said, but I'll defer to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Member Gill. I have a number of questions now. Any other board members? One question I have, Chief, and to Akram, OpenText is a world-class leader in the ability to search documents and index and that. I mean, that's its forte in life. My question is, we have a record system that is run by Versaterm that looks after our incident reports and everything else, and we also have another system that processes Crown brief preparation and etc. I think for the board, I understand the need for the renewing this agreement for support. I don't have an issue with that. My question now is more of a topology. We've got a lot of systems in play. We've got a lot of items that are going on here. Can somebody put together, maybe even between now and the end of a month, a very simple one-pager with a number of sort of squares on it that shows what data is stored by what? I can understand the RMS system or records management system for the incidents. I understand the systems for Crown brief preparation. But where does OpenText fit in our overall management of the information? I can understand having a system to deal with correspondence that comes in from outside to the service and how that's processed through. I can understand another type of a system where officers from a criminal investigation branch are adding additional notes to incidents, but I would thought that's going into RMS. So where's OpenText being used? How is this being used in our mix of systems? I think that would help. Also identify, its criticality within our mix. Can something be put together in a 30-day time period? Something very simple, Chief.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can certainly look to do that for you. The report, I think it outlines what on top of page 2, it talks about OpenText is used for the management of records, physical and electronic, throughout their life cycle. So I'm not sure that addresses the questions that you have, or if it's still a need to have the topology diagram that you've asked for.
And then the question I have is, we have a record system, an RMS system from Versaterm that dovetails into the incident. So a call comes in, an incident number is generated, an officer goes to the scene, takes a report, fills it in on his mobile workstation. That's where I'm having a difficulty dealing with OpenText, because the RMS system should be able to provide indexing and finding stuff and being able to say this record occurred in 2019 or whatever it was in a specific zone. That's the only. I'm just still having a bit of an issue as to how this fits in and how this is used.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if there's any value in having Mr. Gary Holden. I'm not sure if he's available.
He's on vacation.
Oh, he's on vacation. I'm sorry. So much for that.
I mean, I would welcome a phone call when Gary's back with Akram for half an hour to educate myself as the chair of the technology committee as to where this fits in. How does this fit into the mix? I don't have an issue with supporting the support going forward with this, but I really would like to know how this fits into everything.
We can certainly accommodate for you either a meeting or a conversation with Mr. Holden.
As I said, I don't want to create huge amounts of work for people or anything like that, but just for sort of an understanding as to how this fits into everything. Because I mean, we're moving into some new technology through Microsoft 365, and I agree that possibly a year's time from now, another discussion might say, we've used it for years, we no longer require it. But right now, I'm at a bit of a loss as to how this fits into everything. So if that can be arranged in the next, within the next month or so, that would really be appreciated.
Yes, that's not a problem.
We have a mover and seconder to this. Any additional questions from board members? So the question on this is a receive for approval to move forward with the one-year software maintenance renewal to OpenText for a cost of $108,286.37. I'll call the question by saying, is there anyone not in agreement to approve this? Not hearing any, then this item moves forward and it is approved. Let me just get back to my top of my agenda here. We are now into any additional new business from board members. Chief, is there anything addition that should be added on here?
Through you, Chair, no, I've got no additional information or items.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
And
Chair.
basically at 11 o'clock, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for attending.